Okay, folks, it's 12 o'clock. Just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. This is the 12 o'clock panel as part of our civic space conversation all day. The City of New Haven, together with our partners at the Arts Council, have put together a series of conversations, if you will, just the initial look at what we're seeing across a broad range of topics in our society and in our community. Try to balance with direct COVID response to the longer haul lens that we'll need to be focused on as well as we look toward recovery. My name is Michael Piscatelli. I'm the Economic Development Administrator for the City of New Haven. I'm really honored to be joined by this wonderful panel of local, national experts, people who've been with us for a very long time and people just coming to our table, if you will, to get the conversation started. We've had great conversations all morning. If those of you who've caught the workspace panel, it just kind of gave a lens as to some of the challenges and great opportunities that we have coming forward, if you will. So I'm going to introduce our team and then I'll make a couple of more opening remarks and then we'll get right into the Q&A. There is a chat feature, so if you have questions or would like to weigh in on the conversation, please use the chat feature and we'll do our level best to get those answered. So first, a new person for our community here in New Haven. People may or may not be familiar with Dana Becerra. She's president of the Heron Foundation out of New York City. Dana breathes a wealth of experience, and the foundation has a social impact mission. And coming from a dairy farmer community out in California, have great insights on when times are really difficult and how to pull a lot of those together. And as a community, we're really looking forward to hearing Dana's insights today and some of the work of the foundation in general. And then I think many of you know Anika Singh Lamar, who's with the Yale Law School and has been running the Community Economic Development Clinic for some time. And Anika, together with an entire team of folks from the law school, have been incredibly valuable and trusted partners as we work with so many small businesses here in the community that are truly hurting as a result of the coronavirus and trying to navigate the myriad of federal and state programs. No easy task, and really appreciate the insights that Anika brings to the table today. And I think many of you know Kevin Hively, who's the founder of Ninigret Partners. Kevin has been our trusted thought partner and strategist for many years. You'll recall when we first launched Downtown Crossing and the removal of the highway, Kevin was one of our big assists on the consultant side to sort of figure out the right way to launch such a big initiative here in the city. And then follow that up with work on the Worcester Square planning study. You see that work ongoing and into implementation. And then most recently, earlier this year, just this year started so differently. We launched a sector strategy for the neurosciences, in part because New Haven has such a strong base, an economic base and innovation, that the neurosciences was coming to the forefront. So really pleased to have Kevin join us as well. And then later on today, we're going to be joined by Eric Ray from Potent Perspective Coaching. I think you know Eric here in the community for his work with smaller organizations, helping strategize and create community cohesiveness. Also has a startup as well. So if you've been in some of our other webinars or activities recently, you can see and know some of the challenges that we've had in the startup community as we sort of navigate the pandemic. I do want everyone to understand, and we've shared this on our Together New Haven platform, all of the resources that we have for small businesses today. So if you in particular are impacted by the coronavirus, either a person, a small business downtown or a small business in the neighborhoods, a freelancer, we have resources available to you. So as we do that direct response, we also make the pivot toward what recovery looks like. And hi, Eric, how are you? Eric, thanks so much for joining us. I just did your introduction. We'll get to you in just a minute. So nice to see you here today, and you're joined by our panel. And as I had said, it's the direct response, which is right in front of us. So many people in our community are hurting, all of us in some respects, because of the pandemic. But that lens has to be widened out a little bit. And I'm really grateful for the insights that I've learned already from this group, and look forward to the conversation today as we share it with a wider audience, if you will. So Anika, why don't we start there? Your work with the law clinic has just been exceptional. What are we seeing? What are we seeing in this community that might be a little bit different otherwise and just generally?
Sure. So thank you for having me. Just by way of background, I don't know, Mike, I guess about 6 weeks ago now, we started a conversation about trying to get a sense of what was happening on the ground, and began the process of developing a survey tool to help do that. And with some help from with a lot of help from an economist at the university, John Eric Humphreys, we were able to put together a survey that's now gone out and has been out in the community for the last couple of weeks. So if it's okay, I'll go ahead and pop up the screen showing the most recent data from that. Great. Okay. Can everyone see this PowerPoint? Okay, just, okay. So I'm not going to go through every slide, but this just gives you a sense of where we are today. This is the most recent summary of results we've got. You'll see here that of the 74 organizations that were seeking some kind of assistance, we've been able to reach, the law school has been able to reach 41 of them. We've tried to reach all of them, but it, may or may not have connected with everybody. And then I'll just scroll through about what kinds of help people are looking for. So far, and this shouldn't be at all surprising given how much attention in the press has been around government aid programs, the #1 request has simply been learning about those programs. And when we say government aid programs, we're including the various local nonprofit, foundation, chambers of commerce that are offering programs as well. We've tried to bring everybody up to speed on everything. I think over the coming months, we will find that a bunch of these other buckets of need, negotiating with landlords, financial planning, business planning, getting accustomed to a new environment where you're coming up with an online presence or a different way of doing your business than you were doing before. We'll see more of that over the coming weeks. Again, we've reached out to everybody, made contact with just over half, provided the basic information that people needed, requested. And then we found that of the organizations that we speak to, and we've spoken to about 120 something total. So we've been taking in businesses outside of just this survey. And I want to talk a little bit about how we've been reaching those other businesses as well. We found that about 1 out of 5 really needs more additional assistance and handholding. And we're actually have signed, legal engagement letters with them and are continuing to represent them on other matters. We did have some open-ended boxes that people could provide text responses to things. And these are just some examples of things that people said that they really were going to need in their own words. You'll see, again, there is a lot here about government programs, but also some focus on a New Haven specific marketing campaign to help people kind of see around the corner beyond disaster relief to recovery. Okay. Let me. We also got some answers about reduced capacity, where people, how people are doing. Are they in business right now? Are they operating at all? And you'll see that obviously, like the vast majority, it's a self-selecting sample of folks who responded to the survey, and the vast majority of those were not operating or were reduced capacity, and a significant number of the sample size had lost at least 90% of their monthly revenue, which is enormous. And about half had been forced to engage in some kind of layoffs. Most think that they'll come back, but they're experiencing deep levels of uncertainty. So that's a sample that is skewed in one sense because those are businesses that all sort of got notice of this survey online and had access to the internet. And but it's also skewed in the sense that it's the folks who were most desperate who were probably most likely to click and tell us what was going on with them. So that's sort of a snapshot in time.
Thanks so much, and can't thank enough the work that you did, Dave Wilkinson, the entire team, reaching out to everyone. And I think one of the real takeaways coming out of it was, there's no light switch in terms of how people bounce back, and even with some of the accelerated conversation about reopen, it's going to be a process and take quite a bit of time to unwind it. I think it's a good pivot point as well. Kevin, we've talked a lot about the nomenclature of the economic engine of Connecticut, which People's Bank had tabbed New Haven based on our strong performance and innovation, the real strong base of eds and meds here in the city. Not just maybe a month before the pandemic hit, one of the first national advertising campaigns around a pharmaceutical product invented here in New Haven, Nurtec, was launched nationally, just to give you a sense for the strength of our innovation sector and the meaningful nature of work here. What are we seeing, relative to the nation and maybe the world about how this particular pandemic will affect that economic trajectory relative to elsewhere?
Thanks, Mike. I think it's going to really, New Haven's in a very interesting situation compared to other cities that are college towns, if you will, in the sense of the financial strength of the university compared to some of the other schools around the country. With that being said, I think you have to take the higher education component and break it into two different buckets. One bucket is the student-centric part of higher education, and the second bucket is the research part of higher education. And they manifest themselves differently in the city. And if the students don't come back, let's say for a year, that's going to have a very different kind of impact than necessarily what might happen with the research side of the operation, and particularly about the way how money flows through the city. So I think making sure to understand that distinction is a really, really important component. And for the rest of it, I think people are just trying to figure it out. Nobody really knows yet what's going on. There's so many uncertainties that I think it's really premature to call the death of university towns, the death of cities, the death of everything that we know. If this lasts 5 to 6 months and we get to a fairly low hospitalization rate, which I think is the number that actually matters, frankly, more significantly than in some ways the case rate does, then maybe things aren't as dramatic a shift as we make some adjustments. And I refuse to use the word new normal, by the way. The other side of it is that if this lasts 18 months, 2 years, 30 months, all bets are off at that point. And I think seeing out that far, and anybody who thinks they can is probably fooling themselves.
Yeah, I think one of the real important reasons why we're in a big listening mode right now and doing our level best to assist people in need right away. And certainly, to your point about, what we're seeing on the ground and the disparities that are uncovered, so research really strong. Students drive, the academic traffic drives a little bit of the on the ground work. 24% of the greater New Haven economy is in the hospitality sector, the arts, the creative class, the restaurants. These are many of the residents who have been unemployed through this. If you heard the numbers on Friday, about 500,000 Connecticut residents are now unemployed. So real impacts in the neighborhoods as well. Eric, why don't we kick it over to you? Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing in the neighborhood, about how it's affected just startup culture and some of the work that you're doing.
Sure. Yeah, I think startup culture. I think things are slow. I think people are trying to get a hold and sort of figure out how they do business in this world. There's a sense, at least for me, and I think many others, that understanding all of the ramifications of what distancing actually meant took some time. It wasn't sort of overt and obvious the different ways that business would be affected, I think, up front. And so it's certainly taken me some time to kind of get adjusted and figure out, how do I run a delivery service, for example, and keep both myself and my customers safe. What does that mean for costs, for the investment that I've had to make in, I don't have any employees, so it's just me, but my own PPE. How do I invest in the sort of the time for the cleaning products and these kind of things for that to work? And also the time investment, for example, where I source my products, my raw ingredients, I've got to wait in line now to get in because there's capacity issues. Well, I spent 90 minutes one day just in line before I even got to shopping. So all of those things have been kind of shifting and making the landscape a little tricky, certainly for businesses that are already started. My business is still young, but we've got, just going on about 2 years under our belt. So we were fortunate in that regard, and we'll make it through this. We'll be fine. In fact, delivery businesses have done well. So in that case, for me, that's worked out. But I can't imagine thinking about starting a business in this kind of environment. Just the level of uncertainty that exists at the moment, and trying to figure it out. So. But people are doing it. I think there are resources available for them, including myself as a coach and as working with some organizations around that. So, I'm cautiously optimistic, but taking lots of caution.
Oh, understood completely. I was struck by the statistic that came out last week that retail is down 16.4% for April. That's a national statistic. And I have to say, I thought it would be more. And then you sort of, so you dive into a little bit and you wonder, is it only 16.4% because of this sort of shift share to national, online, other ways to get your retail purchases in? And what does that mean for us in terms of reinforcing a buy local message? And so many merchants downtown and all around the city have sort of figured out ways to sell, but whether or not the gap is widening and something that we really need to reinforce the buy local approach here, because many online platforms are much more robust if it's sort of national in focus.
I think that's right, Mike, and I can tell you just again, like anecdotally from my experience. I think there's been like a shift in retail to things that are helping people kind of get through, the distancing and the quarantine time. So I went to purchase a product. My wife happens to be a gamer. She wanted to be able to game with her siblings. She needed one of those little headsets. So I thought I would surprise her and just like go to GameStop. I could do the curbside delivery. They would come out, totally sold out.
No kidding.
Totally sold out because I'm not the only one that had that idea. So I think, I think what I would sort of assert there is that people are sort of doing the things to try to find some level of ease or comfort or stay connected to themselves and the things that they like to do. So.
If our attendees haven't yet, the family meals from one of our great restaurants here in the city are great ways for both family cohesion and supporting restaurants, and these family of 4-packs. I mean, they are just fantastic. Or as I said the other day with Barcelona, it was amazeballs. It was that good. And anyone who has an opportunity to just take advantage of some of the great work that's already happening here in the city. Dana, we needed someone from New York City.
I so don't qualify.
You take a minute to introduce yourself and so many of the insights, I think early on in the pandemic, we had said, we are New York in many ways, in this global, if you look at, pull the lens out, we are part of Metro New York in so many respects, not just commuter traffic, but certainly socioeconomic cohesion. Tell us a little bit about the foundation, what you're seeing down your way, and insights.
Sure, absolutely. So as Mike mentioned, and by the way, I haven't heard amaze balls in a long time, so you get props in my category. I'm president of the Heron Foundation. We are about 25, 26, 27 years old, depending on how you want to count. We're anonymous by founding, but when we came into this world, it was with the mission of helping people and communities to help themselves. We do work nationally, and ironically, haven't actively worked in New York in quite some time, despite having been based there. So we're active in a handful of geographies, Jackson, Mississippi, different parts of Maine, the San Joaquin Valley of California, and have a particular bias for rural and the urban-rural relationship. So that's a little bit about our history. And I think if there's anything we're known for, as an anonymous foundation, we try to always fly below the radar screen. But if there's something we're known for, it's always trying to use all of our capital in service to our mission. So everything is fair game at Heron, whether that means our conventional endowment portfolio, which has been always managed in accordance with our mission, or any philanthropic tool you can imagine. So bringing the lens, I suppose in this case, more of a capital provider, we've been running fast and furious trying to listen to community-based players for what they need and what, if anything, capital, financial capital specifically, because at Heron we work with human, natural, civic, and financial capital, so finance is one tool. But if there's anything we can bring to bear. And I think as I was looking through, so I know very little about New Haven, and that's part of how I met some of you. I'm trying to learn quickly about New Haven. We've been doing things like looking at your SBA 7A lenders. You all have them. You have a preponderance of them that service the New Haven market. As a capital provider, we've been buying SBA 7A loans off their balance sheet as quickly as we can in order to supply liquidity to place-based lenders. CDFIs, some of whom of course are 7A lenders, but do other types of lending. We're providing low cost capital to them, in some cases 7, 8, 9, 10-year money at 2%, 3%, whatever is effective for the transaction. And as we headed into COVID, realizing whether it's the PPP program or more generally, small business, Main Street businesses, which is our core interest, need flexibility. And so for us, we've been placing and then forgiving. Wasn't intended that way, but it's the way it's worked out. Forgiving a number of program-related investments because the borrowers that we've went to are telling us they can offer forbearance and forgiveness and flexibility only if they have the flexible capital to do so. So we are both in learn, assimilate, and try to react mode. And we focus a lot, I appreciated Kevin's point about focusing on the education aspect and the research aspect of universities. We also focus a lot on the operating enterprise. That is, in our shop, we refer to EDS, MEDS, and FEDS, the operating enterprise. And so procurement, small contractor initiatives, small supplier initiatives, what is needed to broker those gaps, all with a lens on trying to anchor reliable, repeatable revenue for small business in a place. Because anybody can get bank support and bank finance if they have reliable, repeatable revenue. And so as a funder, the benefit to a shop like Heron is we're also philanthropists. So using philanthropic tools, if we can help an anchor, and as I understand, yours are really forward-thinking anchors. You have the luxury of that, not all markets do. But if we can help an anchor to disaggregate their spend, to understand what conceivable amount of their spend could be addressable locally, we'll pay for that, if you will, with a grant dollar. And then also as philanthropists, we often pay for small business census. Who's present in the market? What types of businesses are present And then can we help broker, along with many, many partners, of course, can we help broker a matching between that reliable, repeatable revenue and a small business's ability to show up? And often that means working capital needs to be placed, often quite cheaply. So we're learning, we're experimenting, trying to figure out how to be useful.
Thanks so much. I think it's incumbent, as you just said, and all of us, it's such a learning mode that we're in, and together with our attendees and the panelists, those insights, who's doing, who's trying, what has been successful, what needs to maybe be a pivot. I think you see this a little bit with the outdoor dining. It's sort of just an immediate challenge for some of our small business restaurants, is to how much do we focus on a takeout model? How much do we pivot to outdoor dining? And how do we sort of maintain some semblance of viability in such a challenging time? Want to pivot a little bit?
Mike,
Oh,
I just wanted to bring up along the lines of that point, one of the things I think that's, critical for any business is to be able to sort of see what's going on and be able to react to that. So like, what I've seen among many smaller shops and other business owners that I work with is there's been a focus on what maybe used to be a minuscule part of their business, but is now really, like, in some cases the only thing they have left, or is sort of tangential. So for example, I'm thinking off the top of my head of Neville Wisdom, who is a fashion designer, right? Well, he's pivoted to making masks. And so he's making masks, essentially full time, because he can't sell, ballroom gowns right now. So things like that are happening in pockets where, I'm sure in January, if you would have told him, all of his revenue was going to come from face masks, he'd be like, "You're out of your mind." But that's the kind of thing that's happening in small businesses that have some flexibility and are nimble enough to kind of respond to like what they're seeing. Of course, not all businesses are like that, but I that's what I take from your dining outdoors kind of example, which is some smaller shops are able to respond in an effective way.
I think that's really helpful. It's also a great example of, capacity to pivot, capacity to support all the sort of different challenges that we faced over the last couple of months and going forward. Want to throw this out to all of you because I think it's really important to the New Haven experience and our journey together. There's when people come into our office and they talk about wanting to come here, what's your economy like, this, that, we always sort of start with, it's a city that cares. The community, stakeholders, residents, government, pick a stakeholder. People really care about this place. There's a passion here. There's an investment of time. There's the need to convene, to be together. And, on one hand, we all launch projects and this and that, but convening matters and talking to one another. And there's some value to doing that online. But walk us through a little bit about how we maintain that high level of cohesion among our entire community, the one city, even when maybe we can't necessarily convene the way we used to. And I'll start with you, Anika, and then just go around the horn.
I don't feel like I have a good answer here. I mean, this has been a worry, a big worry for me. One bit of recent history that I've been trying to learn from are critiques of relatively recent disaster relief programs. So we did some work in my clinic a couple of years ago enforcing the civil rights settlement agreement that came out of New Jersey's spend of its Sandy relief dollars with some clients in New Jersey. And I have been over, I expect to be offering a class in the fall at the law school that will focus specifically on small business and community in times of disaster and crisis, that will continue the COVID work that we've started with you and Mike and others. And one reason I wanted to really offer that as a new class and not simply as a part of my existing course in community development was because I really wanted to look back at this history with disaster relief programs. So I've been looking back at this New Jersey example, and there were three big complaints about how New Jersey first allocated its Sandy dollars or planned to allocate its Sandy dollars that formed the basis for the civil rights complaint. And if you, it really comes down to doing things rushed and doing things the way you've always done them because you're in a rush, and listening to the people you've always listened to and who you're on your speed dial because you're rushing, and worrying about the people who are at the forefront of your mind, the people who look like you, the people you interact with most because you're rushing. And then failing to take feedback and failing to assess community impacts and unmet needs among people outside of your immediate pool. And when I say you, I mean, you know, decision makers in state government or what have you. So I've been really worried about this because I think it's been, you know, Zoom has worked for allowing us to maintain some modicum of community among our easiest to access community, but it's not good for broadening our community. And New Haven, I think you're exactly right, is a place that actually does a decent job, and we're a highly segregated city and a highly segregated state. But notwithstanding that, we actually try really hard to talk to one another, and it is part of our ethos. And I've been struggling with this, and I think that there's so, you know, I mentioned earlier that we've spoken now, you know, one-on-one to 40 some odd businesses that came to us through that survey tool. But we've spoken to 120 plus businesses total, and a significant chunk of those came to us because my students insisted upon flyering all over New Haven, all of the neighborhood business districts, and then also East Haven, West Haven, the sort of, you know, Main Street corridors and those places. There was a great picture in the Connecticut Law Tribune a couple weeks ago of one of my students in a mask, you know, putting up a flyer on a telephone pole, because that's how we needed to get the word out. So I'm, you know, and then those people did not come to us. Some of them emailed us, but many of them just called and left a voicemail, and we called them back. And, you know, we never forced them to engage with a computer or a smartphone in any form. So I guess that makes me a proponent for thinking low tech, to the extent that it's really a key component of being inclusive.
I think those are incredibly really valuable insights that you just had, particularly the idea of being rushed. We did a mass giveaway a few weeks ago on business, and it was surprising to us, you know, like people that weren't even necessarily in our e-blast and in the system. There wasn't that need for government service before, and now the need is so great and everywhere. Dana, any thoughts from, you know, maybe what you're seeing and just, you know, an observation just on the value of convening and reaching, I guess is the right word.
Yeah, absolutely. So couldn't agree more with the previous comments. We spend a lot of time studying trust, social cohesion, and capacity for collective action, because you can't get to engaged citizenry if you don't have trust and social cohesion. And so we spend a lot of time looking at what the formative components of that are, and huge props to you all. Have Data Haven, who does great data on this sort of thing. A lot of places don't, but couldn't agree more that those are key pieces. And we struggle a decent amount with informal networks. How do you tap? How do you find? How do you source? And how do you tap informal networks? And we're working with some researchers who wrote The Misfit Economy, which is this notion that you know, we want to find, identify, and access informal networks without changing them by your mere presence, because they're working for the constituents that they're working for. And so whether it's papering, you know, telephone poles, or finding communities in rural places that have dark fiber or inoperable fiber, who are not going to get internet access and news blasts. And just for the broad brushstroke, the reason we're concerned about capacity for collective action and social cohesion is the ultimate sign of engaged citizenry is showing up at the polls and voicing your opinion for your elected officials and carrying your voice forward. So for us, as we think about systems change and systemic change, and definitely not a new normal, but pausing to contemplate what we want as a collective future is important. And I will say, I know y'all have a history of convening, which is awesome, because one of the things we find is the communities that have leapt ahead are communities that have undertaken broad-based participatory processes historically. They have these muscles to build from. So whether New Haven has those and we can all find ways to leverage them, or if it's something we need to build more of going forward, I couldn't agree more with trying to figure out what the core components of trust are.
Really, really good insights. I think Kevin has been to many community meetings on very uncomfortable cafeteria chairs. So we've learned what our school children have to go through at lunchtime. But Kevin, thoughts on it? You've been to so many of our community events.
Well, I will say, I mean, New Haven is very unique in how engaged it is. We've done work now, I don't even know how many communities. The only other place that really comes to mind that's as engaged as New Haven is Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh, through the planning department, is going through a very elaborate effort as they begin doing a series of neighborhood plans. We're involved with one right now. And they've gone beyond Zoom. They're working on, they're looking at 3 different interactive platforms so people can actually do workshops and types of meetings on a real-time basis. I think it would not surprise me if you didn't see the good old-fashioned political neighborhood coffee thing come back, so that you can do it with 5 or 10 people. Meetings in a box, lots of different ways are being rolled out or being looked at there in order to kind of keep the community engaged. And as it turns out, and I suspect this will be true in New Haven as well, that they want to be engaged. So getting people to attend has not necessarily been, and participate has not necessarily been a problem. I do think, as Anika said, it is a question of going a little bit deeper. And I think that is going to be the real challenge here of going forward. And the one concern I have is that I do agree with the issue about being rushed. We're making a lot of mistakes. I mean, I could go through some of the mistakes with the way the PPP was designed as an example, because it was rushed. The flip side of it is related to that about being rushed is that I believe that there is a 3 to 6 month window, which is going to decide what the next 2 years looks like. And it's part of we've come up with this kind of 4-part concept, which I can talk about later. But I think what I'm concerned about the flip side of it is that we also allow the perfect to get away in the good. We don't want to be rushed. You want to be smart and thoughtful about this, which is one of the reasons why, I'm a firm believer that you have to have a team that deals with the fire. And then you also have to have a team that's dealing with how do we rebuild once the fire's over, and whose job is not to put out fires. And that will allow you to not necessarily be rushed when you are in that moment. But I also worry that in the search of trying to solve every problem that COVID has highlighted in ways that should make a lot of people really uncomfortable, that the search for perfect is going to get in the way of good.
Really important insights across the board. I think Anika and Kevin, you can share notes about how the challenges of PPP and across the board. Anika's been very vocal about that as well. I think as well, there's the challenge of not having a job and economic circumstance and the strains that it puts on family manifests itself out. And it's just harder to have to be engaged in community voice when there's so many personal issues that we have to deal with and stabilizing effects. Eric, thoughts on convening and what this looks like going forward?
Yeah. So I second basically what everyone has said on the panel. I think these things that have been mentioned have been really critical. I think the only thing I would add is, there is a sense in which our sort of collective humanity, I think, needs to really be acknowledged, healed. I think we need to be with one another in a way that really puts our collective humanity up front. And certainly in the Zoom meetings and the things that I've attended, I've had to be really intentional about kind of recognizing that this picture on the screen actually represents a kind of window into somebody's life. Like there's a human being that lives in a whole world that is completely separate from this little box. Sometimes that feels easier to do in person, but so what I've discovered is just like that intentionality around doing that at the start of every meeting, throughout every meeting, at the close of meetings, really goes a long way to helping people actually feel connected and therefore being able to actually contribute, like you said, to this community voice about what people need. And I just want to sort of highlight and underscore the work that is it Anika? Am I saying that right? Anika? Okay. That Anika's crew is doing in terms of sort of going back to basics, going back to like low tech and delivering flyers, handing off, going into people's doors and dropping things. I think that is going to be ultimately the way that this kind of convening, this coming together actually gets done in a way that includes the broadest swath of people, because the digital divide is real. There's all kinds of things where the people most impacted by this are also going to be the same people who don't have the privilege to do work on Zoom, right? And so paying very close attention to that, I think, is critical. And this balance that Kevin talked about between being thoughtful and smart, while also recognizing the real urgency and the real struggles that people are dealing with is going to be an important balance to strike. So that's how I'm thinking about things anyway at the moment.
One of those big challenges we have is with, the New Haven, if you look at the profile of the New Haven workforce relative to the state as a whole, so many more people who are not salaried, may or may not be essential, and don't have the ability to work from home. And being part and out, on one hand, that's a number of essential workers that are out working, really serving the community every day, and sometimes at great risk. But then others who may not come back right away. Have to be very attentive to the workforce development side. One of the things I think we'll do as resources for our attendees today are some of those things that maybe haven't had a bright light in the media. But for those that are unemployed and have filed a claim, the Workforce Alliance and the state of Connecticut put up hundreds of online technical training programs, so to build skills and skill development and use the time to actually retool, if you will. I see a question in the chat bar, so I'll throw it out to the panel. This is from Kevin McCarthy. Thank you, Kevin, for joining us today, who asks, what are the opportunities arising from the pandemic, and what do we sort of see? Just kind of peek ahead a little bit. Open question, whoever wants to jump on the yellow box.
Please, Eric.
Okay, sorry. One of the things that, from a work perspective that seems to be a potential opportunity is the sort of accessibility for those people that can work at home, who have been able to work at home, who are finding that a pleasant experience, or for people, for example, who are differently abled, who have been asking forever and ever and ever, is there some accommodations? There's some other way I can do this work? Because I can, if I had all my stuff, if I could work from, I would do that. Well, with a flick of a pen, hundreds of thousands of people got sent home and are able to do their work from home. And so I think that has showed us that these kind of things are actually possible. And maybe what that does is opened up a whole new sort of possibility or opportunities for people, maybe with mobility issues, differently abled folks who could actually work quite well from a home setting. So one thing I would contribute.
Great insights.
Hey, Mike. Go ahead, Dana.
Thank you. Sorry. I was just going to pick up on Mike's last point around technical bulletins and whatnot. One of the groups that we've worked with, the Council on Adult and Experiential Learning, has been working in microeconomies and or their surrounding areas to identify what jobs specific to that economy have been lost and what jobs are expected to remain in that community, and then matriculating one to the other to say, you know, the path of least resistance from what you know, job skills wise, is this job. And here are precisely the things, including the universities, technical colleges, whatever, that are offering them. And that way people don't feel quite as untethered. And it may not be, you know, the opportunity to wholesale reimagine themselves, which I hope, you know, people are taking the time as their lives permit to do some of that too. But the very tactical, I had a job, it's gone. What am I looking for? What is the most likely thing I'm able to be hired for? So that's one approach, is mapping what's been lost to what still exists. And the other that we've been looking at, so often WIA money and workforce administration money is about the supply of labor. You know, we'll train you and then we'll throw you into the market, which is often terribly ineffective. So a lot of our partners are starting to work on a demand side of labor pull. So what employers are in the economy, what employers are likely to rehire more quickly, and then how can we upskill their low wage incumbent labor in order to create demand for new entry labor. That's a longer term solution, but it's something that has been working effectively, in particular in hospitals, for example, in other places around the country, because I think waiting for service jobs to come back will be a fool's errand unless we do something else in the interim.
Really important insights. Anika, anything to jump on?
I feel like the pessimist in a room full of optimists because I haven't gotten there yet. I think one thing though that has become clear in the last couple of weeks to folks who have been paying attention to the PPP stuff and other things is the importance of some of our community-based banks and financial institutions. And I think in New Haven, that's been a bright spot. I am in full disclosure on the board at New Haven Bank, which is our local community controlled bank. So there's a little bit of self-interest there, but mostly I've just appreciated that vantage point to see how lucky we are to have a community-based bank and to see what kind of impact they've been able to have over the last few weeks.
Mm-hmm. I think that was a very important pivot in the PPP program to carve out a little bit more money for the smaller banks so we can get out on the street a little bit faster, if you will.
Well, one really tough thing watching some of the businesses we work with are really the smallest of the small. I mean, not small business like 50 employees, small business like 1.5 employees. And it was really tough in that first tranche to watch people who essentially could not apply for this money because they didn't count as a customer at the big national bank where they banked, and therefore could not get in the queue. It was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to see, and I like to think that with us all having some renewed appreciation for those community-based institutions, that we might continue that in future policymaking and our own consumer habits.
All
Mike,
good to see.
I wanted to build on that. The way, for me, the part of the question, the answer to the question is, I think now the one thing I hope will happen, and it absolutely should happen, is that we really actually do attack the digital divide now. It is a fundamental civil rights. I would argue that if you are immunocompromised, until we can figure out a vaccine or even a viable treatment, I would argue it's an ADA issue because it's a part of, and so I think that's an important thing. I think the piece that Anika pointed out and that Dana has pointed out too, and Eric as well, is there now has to be a real conversation about economic resilience as part of an economic development strategy. And I think what it also means is that there is going to need to be a retooling of the way economic development functions work at the county and city level. We've doing work in Flint, Michigan, and Genesee County, and literally 2 days before this all happened, we were up there in a meeting, and the first round had come through, And basically one of the people who was processing some applications said, we still have people who don't have enough, their financial statements aren't in enough order that they can even apply. Forgetting even whether they're a customer. Like, she's literally, one person said, they handed us a shoebox and said, here's my stuff. And so there's this whole other component about economic resiliency, which is the small business world has to change from how do you incorporate or how do you become a sole proprietorship to literally how do you do your books so that at some point in time you can get an SBA loan, you can get an EDA loan, whatever it might be coming down the pike. Because right now there's an entire swath of the community that isn't even eligible because they don't even have the economic foundations to be able to do it. And this has to be, in my opinion, has to be, if we're going to talk about returning the communities and addressing some of the inequities that are in the system, it also means that we're going to have to treat everybody like grown-ups and say, you have to have real books. I can't help you if you don't have real books. At the same time, we're also going to have to make sure we have community banking institutions that are willing to deal and work in that market. So they're hand in hand.
We have seen those shoeboxes here in New Haven as well. And if anybody out there is willing to complement some of our free legal services with some free bookkeeping services, I would really appreciate that.
I think that's a really important insight. And the parallel to it is, with every, as society advances and matures, standards go way, way up. And so we create a higher and higher bar, which, if you're participating and aspiring, you sort of kind of get to that bar. But we've made, I think some very informed decisions recently, pitching for our small contractor program to lower the barrier of entry from a year to 6 months, to give a little bit more access, provide a pathway. The outdoor dining exercise last week, it was just a very high bar to do anything outdoors in the city of New Haven. But the team really worked hard to figure out what the appropriate barrier was for health, safety, and welfare, the public safety, but at the same time give people opportunity. And figuring that piece out, big part of our effort going forward. Got a couple of minutes, Eric, or any things we might have missed or follow up. We try to do this about once a month or so. So, just looking ahead and forward, other thoughts. All right, well, then I'm going to give announcements. First off, on behalf of Mayor Elicker, our entire economic development team, I just wanted to thank the panelists and the attendees for carving out the time. Fast moving set of circumstances, right? We've got a lot of direct stuff happening, but we wanted to take an hour and pause and think that through a little bit. Our Together New Haven platform has all of our resources, and that's a partnership with the economic development organizations of the region. We did that very much to improve the customer experience. It's just so confusing and the navigation is so challenging. So if you go to Together New Haven, we will find a way to get you the survey from the Yale Law Clinic. And we will find a way to get you into technical resources to assist maybe with a small grant or other program, or the application for outdoor dining, anything we can do to support workers as well as our small businesses. And then, although I'm not very good at backgrounds in these Zoom calls, I did put the census flyer. We have more census paper that has been very difficult to get out. But it's really important in New Haven. We did a caravan around the city last week, just getting out in the neighborhoods and being very vocal about how important it is now that the paper surveys are out, that everyone fill out their census form. That's going to be very important for us to have the resources that we need going forward. Great. I want to thank our panelists, thank the attendees for coming today. This will be posted online. The conversation will continue. We have other panels throughout this day. And we'll pick up Economic Rebound again in June. So thank you all very much. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.